Amara was 25 years old and already carried a lifetime of sorrow in her eyes. The city was vast, crowded, filled with neon lights and rushing cars. But to her, it was nothing more than a cold shelter. Every night, she searched for a bench in the park or an abandoned bus stop where she could rest her head. Sometimes she found a broken wooden crate to lie upon, sometimes only the bare pavement. The air smelled of dust, exhaust fumes, and fried food from roadside vendors. To most people, this was an ordinary city. To Amara, it was a battlefield where every day was a struggle to stay alive. She had not always lived this way. There had been a time when she dreamed of becoming a teacher. She had studied hard during her teenage years, often staying awake under a candle flame to finish homework. Her mother used to encourage her, whispering that education was the only way to escape poverty. But life did not bend to dreams. Her father abandoned the family when she was only 15. 2 years later, her mother died of an untreated illness that money could have cured. The little house they rented was taken from her when she could no longer pay the landlord. At 18, Amara stepped into the streets with only a torn backpack and a few books that meant the world to her. Those books became her treasure. They were stained by rain and smudged by fingerprints, but she kept them wrapped in plastic and hidden inside her bag. Whenever she felt crushed by hunger or loneliness, she opened them and let the words remind her she was still intelligent, still capable of learning. That was her rebellion against despair. While other homeless souls numbed themselves with cheap alcohol or bad company, Amara clung to knowledge as her only anchor. Day after day, she tried to earn coins through small jobs. She washed plates in a roadside food stall. She carried loads for market women who shouted at her if she moved too slowly. She sang at intersections for strangers who ignored her. Yet the coins were never enough. At night, her stomach cramped with hunger. Her feet were blistered from walking barefoot most of the time. Her clothes were worn until the seams threatened to fall apart. But despite the harshness, there was always something gentle in the way she treated others. She shared her bread crust with street children. She knelt down to tie the shoelaces of a boy she barely knew. Even in suffering, she still chose kindness. Children were drawn to her. Perhaps it was her calm voice or the way her dark eyes sparkled whenever she explained something. Many afternoons she sat near the park, scribbling words and numbers. With a stick on the dusty ground, teaching smaller children their alphabets and multiplication tables. They giggled when they got it right and clapped for themselves. Amara smiled at them as if they were her own students in a classroom she never had. She never asked for payment. Their laughter was her reward. Watching them reminded her of what she had lost, but also of what she might still give to the world. Yet the world rarely saw her the same way. To most passers-by, she was only a homeless woman in ragged clothes. Shopkeepers waved her away when she stood too close. Drivers rolled up their windows when she approached to sell bottled water. People crossed the street to avoid her. She had learned to lower her gaze, to keep her shoulders bent, to take up less space, as if apologizing for existing. The names people threw at her hurt less over time, but the silence hurt more. Being invisible was the cruelest punishment. One evening after a long day of wandering, Amara sat by the riverbank, with her knees drawn to her chest. The city lights glittered on the water like stars she could never touch. She whispered a quiet prayer. God, if you still see me, give me one chance. Not wealth, not comfort, just one chance to use the mind you gave me. She had repeated that same prayer for years without answer. Yet she still whispered it because hope, however small, was the only fire that had not been extinguished in her. When dawn arrived, she rose again and faced another day. She cleaned her face with water from a public tap, tied her hair into a rough bun, and walked into the crowded market. She ignored the vendors who shouted insults and searched for small tasks. By mid-morning, she had earned just enough to buy a piece of bread. As she ate slowly, she noticed a group of children walking by in crisp uniforms, their laughter ringing in the air. For a moment, she closed her eyes and imagined herself among them, holding books, answering questions, being called by name. The vision faded, replaced by the harsh sound of horns and quarrels. She sighed, brushed the crumbs from her lap, and stood to continue her day. Amara did not know that her prayer was about to be answered in a way she could never imagine. She did not know that the life of a powerful billionaire and his lonely daughter would soon collide with hers. For now she was still only the homeless woman that the city ignored. But destiny was watching, preparing to weave her story into something extraordinary. Alexander Cole was 35 years old, a man who seemed to have everything the world could offer. He was the head of Cole Enterprises, a company with investments in real estate technology and international trade. His name carried weight in business circles, his face often appeared in financial magazines, and his wealth placed him among the most influential men of the country. Yet behind the polished image of success lay a man who carried his own scars. 3 years earlier, he had lost his wife to a sudden illness. Since then, he had poured his energy into work, building higher towers, signing bigger deals, expanding his empire across continents. But at night, when he returned to his grand mansion, silence followed him through the marble halls. The only sound that mattered was the voice of his daughter Sophia, 10 years old, who had become the center of his world. Sophia was a delicate child, small for her age, with a face that still carried the softness of innocence, but eyes that often revealed sadness, too deep for her years. She was bright and curious, yet school had become a battlefield for her. Despite the expensive tutors, the prestigious private academy, and all the resources Alexander could provide, Sophia struggled to keep up with her classmates. Mathematics confused her, reading assignments left her lost, and her teachers constantly wrote reports about her falling behind. Her classmates mocked her, calling her slow, and the sting of their words drove her deeper into silence. Alexander noticed the way she withdrew, how she sat quietly at dinner pushing food around her plate, how her eyes clouded with insecurity whenever the subject of school arose. He tried to help her, sitting with her over textbooks, but his patience was short, his tone too sharp. He was a businessman used to immediate results, not a gentle teacher. Sophia would shrink under his voice, and the sessions ended with tears instead of progress. Alexander blamed himself. He felt powerless, something he had not felt in years. He could conquer markets and outmaneuver rivals, but he could not heal the fear in his daughter's eyes. He began hiring private tutors one after another, each more expensive and qualified than the last. Yet none succeeded. Some grew frustrated and quit. Others claimed Sophia was simply not capable of keeping up. Alexander dismissed them with anger, but inside he feared they were right. The thought that his daughter might never find confidence in herself haunted him more than any business risk. Sophia longed for her mother's presence. At night, she often clutched a photograph of the smiling woman who used to braid her hair and sing lullabies. Alexander watched her from the doorway, his chest tightening with guilt because no amount of wealth could bring back the woman his daughter missed. He tried to fill the void with gifts, with lavish birthday parties and the best clothes. But Sophia remained lonely. She had no close friends at school, no one who truly understood her. Teachers spoke of her as a problem, classmates mocked her, and her father's attempts to help only left her feeling more inadequate. One afternoon after another frustrating day of lessons, Sophia slipped out of the mansion unnoticed. She walked to the city park, not far from her school, carrying her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. She sat on a bench and opened the pages, staring at numbers that blurred before her eyes. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, "Why can't I do this? Why am I so different from the others?" At that moment, she felt utterly alone, unaware that her small act of rebellion, of seeking quiet in the park, would set into motion events that would change not only her life, but also her father's. Alexander, in his office downtown, was signing another contract. He had no idea that his daughter was sitting in a park, struggling over fractions. No idea that destiny was about to introduce someone unexpected into their lives. In his mansion, staff members assumed Sophia was in her room as she usually was. The day seemed ordinary for everyone, except the lonely little girl whose tears dropped on the pages of her notebook. The city carried on around her cars, honking vendors, shouting children laughing in the distance. For Sophia, it all blurred into noise. She just wanted someone who would not laugh, someone who would sit with her patiently and explain without judgment. She wanted a friend. That desire, pure and unspoken, was about to be answered in the most unlikely way. Sophia wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and stared at the confusing math problem on the page. The numbers swam before her eyes until all she saw was a blur of failure. She closed the notebook with a snap and buried her face in her arms, wishing she could disappear. Around her, the park was alive with movement, but she felt as if she were locked in a bubble of sadness. That was when a shadow fell across the bench. Amara had been walking by, carrying a small bag with scraps of bread she had earned earlier in the market. Her clothes were faded and patched, her hair tied back in a messy bun, but her gaze was steady and gentle. She noticed the girl crying over a notebook and paused. Most people ignored children in fancy uniforms because they belonged to another world, a world that never noticed people like Amara. Yet something about the child's hunched shoulders touched her. She approached slowly and asked in a quiet voice, "Are you all right?" Sophia looked up, startled, and quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed. She expected to see another teacher, maybe a stranger ready to scold her, but instead she saw a young woman whose eyes were kind, though her face was tired. "I cannot understand this," Sophia admitted, opening the notebook reluctantly. Amara sat beside her, leaving space, so the girl would not feel threatened. "Let me see." She studied the math problem, a set of fractions that needed to be added together. Amara smiled softly. "They are only numbers. Watch." She picked up a stick from the ground and drew circles in the dirt beneath the bench. She shaded half of one circle, then a quarter of another, explaining patiently that to compare them they needed the same size parts. Sophia leaned forward, eyes widening as the concept became clear. Slowly, she tried the next problem. For the first time, she solved it correctly, and a shy smile spread across her face. You see, Amara encouraged, you are capable, you just need someone to show you slowly. Sophia felt a warmth in her chest she had not felt in months. No tutor had explained it like this, simple and calm, without sighing or looking disappointed. Who are you? She asked hesitantly. Amara hesitated, unused to introducing herself. Just Amara, she finally said. I used to go to school, too, before life changed. Sophia studied her, noticing the worn clothes, the tired hands, and yet the glow of intelligence in her eyes. You are not a teacher, Sophia said softly. Amara shook her head. Not anymore. But you could be, Sophia whispered, because you are better than the ones my father hires. Amara looked away, her throat tightening because those words awakened a dream she thought she had buried forever. The bell from a nearby church chimed the hour. Sophia jumped, realizing she had been gone too long. I should go, she murmured, closing her notebook. Will I see you again? Amara gave a small shrug, uncertain. If you want to, I come here often. Sophia nodded quickly, her heart fluttering. Thank you. She clutched her notebook as if it had become precious. As she ran off toward the street that led to her home, Amara watched her go, a strange mix of hope and fear stirring inside. She had helped many children, briefly teaching them letters in the dirt. But something about this child was different. There was a loneliness in her that mirrored her own, and Amara wondered if fate had placed them together for a reason. The next day, Sophia returned. This time, she carried more notebooks and a pencil case. She looked around nervously until she saw Amara by the same bench. Without hesitation, she sat down and opened her books. Can you help me again? Amara smiled despite herself. Of course. That afternoon, they worked through reading passages and word problems. Sophia's laughter rang out when she finally understood, and the sound filled Amara with unexpected joy. Days turned into weeks, and the park bench beneath the old tree became their secret classroom. Sophia grew brighter, her confidence blossoming with each meeting. Amara discovered that teaching her reignited her own spirit. She began to feel alive in a way she had not for years. But secrets have a way of unraveling. One afternoon, as Sophia bent over her work, a tall figure watched from a distance. Alexander Cole had been told his daughter Owen wandered away after school. Concerned, he had followed her discreetly. When he saw her sitting with a woman in ragged clothes, his heart clenched with alarm. Who was this stranger teaching his daughter under a tree? He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing, his protective instincts rising. Sophia looked up and froze. Her father stood there, his expression unreadable. Amara sensed the tension and rose slowly, her heart pounding. She had no idea that this moment would change everything. Alexander stood a few paces away, his sharp eyes fixed on the strange sight before him. His daughter, usually shy and withdrawn, sat laughing and working eagerly on math problems with a woman who looked as though she had been pulled straight from the street. His first instinct was fury. How could Sophia trust a stranger, and one who looked like she lived in poverty? He strode forward, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel path. Sophia looked up, fear flooding her face. "Daddy, wait!" she cried, but Alexander's voice cut across the air. "Who are you, and why are you with my daughter?" Amara's breath caught. She straightened her hands, trembling slightly, and lowered her gaze in respect. "I am no one important, sir," she said softly. I only tried to help her with her homework. Alexander's jaw tightened. You are no one important yet. You sit here teaching my child as though you belong. Sophia jumped to her feet, clutching her notebook protectively. She does belong, Daddy. She helped me more than any tutor you brought. Please don't be angry with her. Alexander blinked, surprised by the fire in his daughter's voice. He had not heard such conviction from her in months. He studied Amara more closely now. Her clothes were worn, her shoes nearly falling apart, but there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself. Still, suspicion gnawed at him. Why are you near this park every day? He demanded. Amara hesitated, then answered simply, because I have nowhere else to go. I live on the streets. Alexander felt a stab of unease. A homeless woman teaching his daughter. It sounded absurd, even dangerous. He looked back at Sophia. Why did you not tell me about this? Because you would not understand, she whispered. Everyone thinks I am stupid, Daddy. The teachers, the tutors, even you sometimes. But she explains things and I understand. She believes I can do it. Please don't take her away. Her words struck Alexander like a blow. Guilt twisted inside him. He realized how often his impatience had made his daughter feel inadequate. He turned his gaze back to Amara. What exactly do you gain from this? He asked coldly. Amara's eyes met his for the first time, dark and steady. Nothing, sir. I only know what it is like to feel invisible, to be told you are less. I did not want her to feel the same. Silence followed, heavy and thick. Alexander was torn. His protective instincts screamed that this was unsafe, yet he could not ignore the change in Sophia. She stood taller, her eyes alive with determination, clinging to the hope that this woman gave her. He had never seen her fight for anyone before. Against his will, a seed of curiosity took root. He cleared his throat. Very well. If you truly can teach her, then prove it. Come to the house tomorrow. If you succeed, perhaps I will consider allowing this arrangement under my watch. Sophia gasped with relief, while Amara froze in shock. She nodded slowly, unsure if she was walking into a trap or an opportunity. Alexander did not wait for further words. He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder and guided her away, though his mind remained unsettled. That evening, in the marble halls of the mansion, Alexander replayed the scene. He could not forget the gentle firmness in Amara's tone, nor the way Sophia's eyes had lit up beside her. Who was this woman really? Could a person from the streets hold such power over his child? He resolved to find out. Meanwhile, Amara lay awake on a bench beneath the stars, her thoughts spinning. She had faced scorn many times before, but never from a man like Alexander Cole. Tomorrow she would step into his world, a world of wealth and judgment, and she feared it would crush her. Yet deep down a spark of courage flickered. For Sophia's sake, and perhaps for her own, she would face it. The next morning, Amara washed her face with cold water from a public tap and brushed her hair with her fingers until it looked somewhat neat. She wore the cleanest clothes she had, though the fabric was faded and patched. Clutching her small bag that contained her treasured books, she walked nervously toward the grand gates of the Cole mansion. The guards at the entrance eyed her with suspicion. One of them sneered, "Are you sure you are at the right place?" Amara swallowed her fear and replied softly, "Mr. Cole asked me to come." After a tense moment, the guard spoke into his radio, and moments later, the heavy gates swung open. Amara stepped inside and felt as though she had entered another universe. The driveway was lined with trimmed hedges, fountains glittered in the morning light, and the mansion itself stood like a palace of glass and stone. Each step made her feel smaller, her heart hammering, as she imagined being thrown out at any moment. Inside, Alexander waited in his study, his expression serious. Sophia ran to greet Amara with a smile that melted some of her anxiety. "Daddy, she is here," she cried happily. Alexander raised a hand for silence. "Come," he instructed, leading them into a spacious library. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with volumes that reminded Amara painfully of what she had lost. A large desk sat in the center, where Sophia's notebooks were spread out. Amara sat across from the girl, while Alexander observed from a distance, arms folded. At first her hands trembled as she turned the pages, but once Sophia asked her first question, instinct took over. Amara explained gently, drawing examples from real life, breaking down each problem to simple steps. Sophia's eyes lit with recognition, nodding eagerly, her pencil racing across the page. Within an hour, she solved problems that had frustrated her for weeks. She laughed with delight, and Alexander noticed the sparkle in her eyes. For the first time in months, his daughter looked proud of herself. The sight stirred something in him that business victories never had. Still, he remained cautious. When the lesson ended, he dismissed Sophia with a pat on the head and asked Amara to stay. "You are clearly capable of teaching," he admitted slowly, "but I must know your intentions. Why should I trust you with my daughter?" Amara met his gaze steadily, though her voice shook. "I want nothing from you, sir. I only want to give her what I once wished someone had given me, patience and belief. She is not stupid. She only needs someone to see her." Alexander studied her face, searching for deceit, but found only sincerity and exhaustion. "Very well," he said. "Finally, you may continue teaching her here, under my supervision. Do not betray my trust." Amara nodded relief washing over her, but not everyone in the mansion shared Alexander's decision. The head housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Bennet, frowned when she saw Amara in the halls. She whispered to the maids, "What is a street woman doing here?" The cook shook her head, muttering that such people only brought trouble. Their stares followed Amara everywhere, making her cheeks burn, but she endured it for Sophia's sake. Days turned into weeks, and Sophia blossomed. She grew more confident, answering questions in class at school, returning home, eager to show her father what she had learned. Alexander watched with quiet wonder as his daughter transformed. He found himself lingering in the library, listening to Amara's calm explanations. Sometimes their eyes met, and for a brief second he felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in years, a flicker of admiration that warmed into something more. Amara, too, began to notice the change. Alexander's stern gaze softened when he looked at Sophia, and occasionally when he looked at her. He asked her questions about her past, about what she liked to read, about her dreams, before life pushed her to the streets. She answered cautiously at first, but gradually her words flowed more freely. She told him about her mother, about nights studying under candlelight, about the pain of losing everything. To her surprise, he listened without judgment. One evening after a lesson, Sophia fell asleep at the desk, her head resting on her notebook. Alexander lifted his daughter gently and carried her upstairs. When he returned, he found Amara still sitting quietly, watching the bookshelves with longing. "Do you miss it?" he asked softly. She turned, startled, then nodded. Every day. He hesitated, then said, "Perhaps teaching here can give you some of it back." Amara smiled faintly, gratitude shining in her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt like she was part of something larger than survival. Still, doubts lingered in her heart. She knew she did not belong to his world, and sooner or later it might reject her. But for now, she allowed herself to hope. The weeks that followed unfolded like chapters in a book Amara never expected to read. Each morning she arrived at the Cole mansion and was greeted by Sophia's bright smile, a sight that filled her with strength. Their lessons grew deeper and richer, moving from mathematics to literature, from grammar to small discussions about life. Sophia, once timid and unsure, now leaned forward eagerly, raising questions and laughing when she solved problems. The transformation was so striking that even her teachers at school noticed, sending reports to Alexander praising her progress. For Alexander, this was nothing short of a miracle. He watched his daughter bloom with a mixture of pride and relief, and at the heart of that change stood Amara, the woman he had once dismissed as a dangerous stranger. His suspicion gave way to curiosity, then to respect, and slowly to something more complicated, something he struggled to name. He found himself drawn to the library during their sessions, pretending to read documents while listening to the cadence of Amara's voice as she explained ideas. Her patience amazed him, her ability to turn difficult concepts into stories that captured Sophia's imagination. It reminded him of qualities he had long forgotten existed in people, gentleness and resilience combined. Outside the classroom, their interactions deepened in small ways. Sometimes Amara helped in the kitchen, preparing simple meals she had learned to cook during her years of hardship. One evening, she made a modest stew with ingredients the staff considered beneath the mansion's standards. Yet when Alexander tasted it, he found it richer and more satisfying than the elaborate dishes served at his banquets. He teased her about it, and she blushed, unused to compliments. Another time, he discovered her in the garden, showing Sophia how to plant seeds in the soil. Dirt clung to her hands, her laughter mixing with his daughter's, and for a moment Alexander felt a warmth spread through him, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. It had been so long since he had heard genuine laughter in this house. These moments unsettled him. He was a man of control, accustomed to drawing clear lines between his world and that of others. Yet Amara blurred those lines with every passing day. He began to ask her questions not as an employer, but as a man curious about another soul. At first, she resisted offering short answers, but his persistence wore down her caution. She spoke of her mother, of how she used to dream of becoming a teacher, of the nights she studied by candlelight. She confessed the pain of losing her home and wandering the streets with nothing but books in her bag. She did not cry as she spoke. Instead, her voice carried quiet strength, a determination that touched him more deeply than tears could. In return, Alexander shared parts of himself rarely revealed. He told her about his late wife, about the emptiness her absence left behind, about his fear of failing Sophia. Amara listened without judgment, her gaze steady, and for the first time in years he felt the burden lighten. There was something healing in her presence, as if her own brokenness allowed her to understand his. Sophia noticed too. One evening she looked at her father and whispered with a mischievous smile, "You smile more now." Alexander laughed softly, caught off guard. "Do I?" "Yes." Sophia insisted ever since Amara came. Alexander glanced at Amara, who quickly looked down her cheeks, flushing. That night, as he sat in his study, he found himself thinking not about his business empire, but about the quiet woman who carried the weight of the streets, yet somehow lifted the spirits of his household. The staff remained skeptical, some whispering behind closed doors, but Alexander no longer cared. What mattered was the peace settling into his daughter's life, and the strange new hope stirring in his own heart. Amara too felt the change. Each evening when she returned to the cold bench that still served as her bed, she carried with her the warmth of the day. She replayed Sophia's laughter, Alexander's rare but genuine smiles, and the conversations that made her feel human again. She tried to remind herself that this was temporary, that she did not belong in their world, but her heart betrayed her. For the first time since she lost everything, she allowed herself to dream not of wealth or luxury, but of belonging. Slowly, quietly, a bond was forming between her and Alexander, a bond rooted in shared pain and growing trust, a bond that would soon be tested by the harshness of the world outside. The peace within the Cole household did not remain unnoticed for long. Whispers began in the neighborhood when staff members mentioned that their employer had allowed a homeless woman into the mansion as a tutor for his daughter. At first, it was gossip shared over markets and salons, but soon it spread to the glossy pages of society blogs that thrived on scandal. A billionaire entrusting his only child to a woman from the streets was too strange to ignore. Journalists dug into Amara's past, publishing unflattering photos of her, sleeping on benches, weaving cruel headlines that mocked Alexander's judgment. Business partners began to call with thinly veiled concerns. At board meetings, certain directors questioned his ability to lead rationally if he was entertaining sentimental distractions. One even sneered, "You are risking your reputation for a charity case." Alexander kept his composure, but inside he burned. He had weathered market crashes and hostile takeovers, yet nothing provoked him like hearing Amara belittled. He refused to dismiss her because he had seen what no headline could capture. He had seen Sophia's transformation, the light returning to her eyes, the confidence building with each lesson. That mattered more than the approval of society. But not everyone in the mansion shared his conviction. Mrs. Bennet, the housekeeper, openly scowled whenever Amara entered. She whispered to the maids that soon the master would tire of her and she would be thrown back onto the streets. Some staff refused to serve her tea or set a place for her at the table, subtle cruelties that stung, though Amara bore them silently. She told herself she could endure anything for Sophia's sake, yet doubt gnawed at her heart. One evening, as she walked home from the mansion, she overheard two women in the market laughing. "Did you hear the great Alexander Cole is letting his daughter learn from a beggar? Maybe soon he will marry her too, and we will all be ruled by rags." Their laughter cut through her like a knife. She hurried away, ashamed of a dream she had not even admitted to herself, that perhaps Alexander saw her as more than a tutor. That night she lay awake on the hard bench, wrestling with her emotions. Was she foolish to hope? The next day, Alexander noticed her distracted expression. After Sophia went to bed, he asked her directly, "What troubles you?" Amara hesitated, then whispered, "I am not fit for this place. People will not stop talking. They see me as dirt, and I fear they will turn their scorn on Sophia." Alexander's eyes hardened. Let them talk. they do not decide what is best for my daughter." But she shook her head, tears welling. "You have given me kindness, but I do not want to ruin your name." Alexander felt a pang in his chest. He reached across the table but stopped himself, aware of the line between them. "You are not ruining anything," he said firmly. "You are the reason my daughter smiles again. That is worth more than the approval of people who never cared about us." Still, Amara remained unconvinced. The pressure outside mounted. Reporters camped near the gates, eager to photograph the mysterious woman. Business associates pressed Alexander harder. Some investors threatened to withdraw, warning that scandal could damage the company. The board scheduled a meeting to question his choices. At home, Sophia sensed the tension. One afternoon, she clung to Amara's hand and pleaded, "Please do not leave me. You are the only one who believes in me." Amara's heart broke at the desperation in her voice. She wanted to promise she would never go, but the reality of the world pressed on her chest. She could not bear to be the reason this child lost security again. That night, she packed her small bag and resolved to slip away quietly. She convinced herself it was the only way to protect them. She would vanish before Alexander had to choose between his empire and the woman from the streets. But destiny had other plans, and her decision would lead to a confrontation that neither she nor Alexander could avoid. Rain hammered the city that night, drumming on rooftops and flooding gutters. Inside the Cole mansion, silence stretched through the halls, broken only by the storm outside. Amara moved quietly, clutching her small bag that contained nothing more than her worn books and a change of clothes. She had waited until Sophia was asleep, whispering a soft goodbye at the doorway, though the girl could not hear. Her heart twisted as she turned away each step down the marble stairs. Heavier than the last, she told herself this was mercy. If she left now, Sophia would forget her in time, and Alexander would be spared the scrutiny that had already begun to tear at his reputation. At the main door she hesitated, her reflection staring back from the polished glass. A figure in patched clothing, standing within a palace that had never truly been hers. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open and stepped into the rain. She had barely reached the gate when a voice called sharply behind her. "Amara!" She froze, her heart leaping to her throat. Turning slowly, she saw Alexander striding toward her, rain soaking his white shirt. His expression fierce. "Where are you going?" She lowered her gaze. "I cannot stay. You have already risked too much for me. People are mocking you. Investors are threatening you. If I remain, it will only destroy what you built." He stopped in front of her, water running down his face, his voice low but firm. "Do you think I care about their opinions more than my daughter's happiness?" Amara's voice broke. "I have nothing, Alexander. I am no one. I am the girl on the street they all spit at. You and Sophia deserve someone who belongs to your world, not me." He reached out and caught her arm before she could turn away. His grip was steady, his eyes burning into hers. "You are wrong. From the moment you sat under that tree with Sophia, you gave her what no wealth could buy. You gave her belief. You gave me hope when I thought I had none left. Do not tell me you are no one, because you have become everything to us." Tears mingled with the rain on her cheeks. "Why are you saying this?" "Because it is the truth," he said. "Because I have tried to fight it, but I cannot anymore." "Amara, I love you." The words hung between them, powerful and terrifying. Amara staggered back, shaking her head. No, you cannot. Love does not cross worlds like ours. People like you do not fall for people like me. But his voice rose above the storm. I do. I have watched you heal my daughter. I have felt you heal parts of me I thought were dead with her mother's passing. You are not a burden. You are a gift. She pressed her hands to her chest, torn apart by longing and fear. I am scared, she whispered, scared of what they will do to you, of what they will say about me. His expression softened, though determination still blazed in his eyes. Let them talk, let them sneer. I built this empire once. I can withstand their scorn again. But I cannot withstand losing you. For a long moment, only the rain spoke. Then Amara let out a sob and fell into his arms. He held her tightly, as if shielding her from the storm, his heart pounding with the certainty of his choice. Sophia, woken by the commotion, peered from an upstairs window and saw her father embracing the woman who had become her guide and friend. A small smile curved her lips before she returned to bed, comforted by the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, her family was whole again. That night marked a turning point. The lines they had both drawn between them dissolved in the storm. No longer teacher and employer, no longer billionaire and homeless woman, but two broken souls daring to choose love despite the walls around them. Yet as dawn crept over the horizon, both knew the battle was far from over. The world would not accept them easily. Trials still waited beyond those gates. But for the first time, they faced it together. The morning after the storm, the city seemed sharper, the air washed clean, yet heavy with anticipation. News had already begun to circulate about Alexander Cole and the mysterious woman seen leaving his gates in the rain. Paparazzi gathered outside the mansion, their lenses hungry for scandal. Inside, Alexander sat at the head of the long dining table, his face calm but resolute. Amara sat beside Sophia, nervous under the weight of so many eyes. For several staff members lingered in the corners whispering. Sophia clutched Amara's hand under the table, a silent promise of loyalty. Alexander set down his coffee cup and looked directly at Amara. I will not hide this anymore, he said with a voice that carried through the room. You are part of this household now, whether the world approves or not. Later that day, he called a press conference. The media swarmed, expecting a denial, perhaps an explanation, that the woman was merely a charity project. Instead, Alexander stood at the podium with Amara and Sophia beside him. He looked into the flashing cameras without flinching. This is Amara, he declared. She has given my daughter what no wealth could provide faith in herself. She is not a scandal. She is a teacher, a healer, and the woman I love. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Questions flew, but Alexander raised a hand and silenced them. My reputation, my fortune, even my position mean nothing if I cannot choose who stands beside me, and I choose her. The statement shook society. Headlines exploded, some praising his courage, others condemning his recklessness. Socialites whispered in outrage, investors panicked, but Alexander did not waver. At the next board meeting, several members confronted him, warning that aligning himself with a homeless woman would damage the company's image. He listened patiently, then replied with steady conviction. If a business cannot withstand the truth that its leader is human, then perhaps it is not worth leading. Some stormed out, but others moved by his resolve remained. Outside the corporate world, ordinary people reacted differently. Stories spread of Amara's past, of her quiet kindness to street children, of the way she carried herself with dignity despite hardship. Many admired her strength. Letters arrived at the mansion from strangers who said they were inspired by her story, by the idea that love could truly cross the boundaries of class. Yet despite the support, Amara still battled her own doubts. One night she stood on the balcony overlooking the glittering city lights, feeling both awe and fear. Alexander joined her, wrapping a coat around her shoulders. "Why do you look so far away?" he asked. She sighed. "Because I still do not know if I deserve this. Your world is bright and powerful. Mine is dark and forgotten. How can the two mix without breaking?" He turned her gently to face him. "Love is not about deserving, Amara. It is about choosing. And every day I will choose you." His words wrapped around her heart like a balm. Slowly she allowed herself to believe. Sophia's happiness cemented her decision. The girl had blossomed, laughing freely, excelling in class, standing taller with pride. Amara saw how much she meant to the child, and that gave her strength to stay. Their small family grew closer with each passing day, sharing dinners filled with laughter, evenings reading by the fire, and walks in the garden, where for the first time in years Alexander's smile felt unforced. But challenges persisted. Invitations to high society events dried up. Old acquaintances avoided Alexander at gatherings. Some tabloids printed cruel caricatures of Amara, mocking her clothes and background. She wept quietly one night, feeling the sting of public ridicule. Alexander found her and wiped her tears, whispering, "They mock because they fear what they cannot understand. Let them, we will endure." And together they did. By the time winter melted into spring, the scandal had begun to lose its fire. People grew accustomed to seeing them together, and gradually respect replaced ridicule. Their love, tested by scrutiny, had not broken. It had only deepened. One evening, as the sun set in golden streaks across the horizon, Alexander knelt in the garden where Amara once taught Sophia, under the mango tree, transplanted from the park as a symbol of their beginning. He took Amara's hands, his voice steady but tender. "You changed my life, Amara. You healed my daughter. You healed me. Now let me spend the rest of my days proving that love has no class. Will you marry me?" Amara's breath caught tears spilling as she whispered yes. Sophia squealed with joy, running to embrace them both. The world might never fully understand their union, but within that garden beneath the branches of a tree that had once sheltered a homeless tutor and a lonely child, love beyond class became not just a dream, but a living truth. A year passed, and the mansion that had once felt cold and silent now pulsed with warmth. Sophia thrived in school, her teachers praising her curiosity and confidence, and she often came home eager to show Amara the stars she had drawn in her notebook or the essays she had written. Alexander watched with pride not only at his daughter's growth, but at the woman who had become the heart of their family. The whispers of society had dulled, and though some circles still sneered, the world seemed to have accepted that the billionaire had chosen love beyond class. Their wedding was not the grand spectacle people expected, but a small and intimate ceremony in the garden, under the mango tree that had been transplanted from the park where their story began. Friends who truly cared gathered along with a few loyal colleagues and neighbors who had witnessed the transformation. Sophia stood between them as they exchanged vows, her smile radiant as she declared herself the happiest daughter in the world. Amara wore a simple gown, not crafted by a designer, but sewn with care by a seamstress she had met during her years on the street, a symbol of her journey and resilience. When Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, Amara felt the weight of every night spent in hunger, every insult endured, every tear shed alone. All of it had led to this moment where she no longer stood as a forgotten soul, but as a woman cherished and chosen. Life after the wedding was not without challenges. There were still business battles to fight and occasional headlines that resurfaced old doubts. But the bond they shared gave them strength. Alexander found himself more grounded, less consumed by ambition, and more attuned to the simple joys of family. Amara continued to teach Sophia, but also began tutoring other children from disadvantaged backgrounds, turning her pain into purpose. Soon, Alexander helped her establish a foundation that offered education to children who, like her younger self, had once been invisible to the world. Together, they visited shelters and schools, their presence a message that no child was beyond hope. Amara felt alive in ways she had never imagined, using her voice to inspire her story to heal. Sophia, proud of her stepmother, often introduced her in class as the bravest woman she knew. Alexander, though still commanding in the boardroom, found his greatest pride in the quiet evenings, when he sat with his wife and daughter around the dinner table, their laughter echoing through halls once filled with silence. One night as they walked in the garden, Amara paused under the mango tree and looked up at the stars, her eyes filled with gratitude. She remembered the prayer she had whispered years ago, asking only for one chance to use the mind she had been given. That prayer had been answered in ways she never expected. She turned to Alexander, who watched her with affection that had only deepened with time. "How did we get here?" she whispered. He smiled, drawing her close, "By refusing to let the world tell us who we could love." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt peace. Sophia ran up to them holding a project from school, and together they admired her work. In that moment, Amara realized she was no longer an outsider looking through windows she could not enter. She was home. She was a wife, a mother, a teacher, and above all, a woman whose worth had finally been seen. The story that had begun with pain and loneliness ended with healing and love, proving that even the most broken paths can lead to extraordinary destinations. And as the stars shimmered above, Amara whispered a final promise to herself and to the family she had found. "I will never waste this chance."